Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today we will be going over the waiver wire. But before we get to the waiver wire, I will be starting out by going over my Thanksgiving week schedule, as the NFL schedule is, a little bit different this week with 3 games on Thursday. In addition to that, I need like an extra day this week just to do some stuff around the house, that type of thing. So, I'm coming out with the waiver wire early. This is going to be before the Monday night game. There will also be some news prior to that, so you can go down and skip to that if you've seen this, the Thanksgiving week schedule, or read ahead here already. There will be early rankings videos tomorrow, maybe into Wednesday morning, but whatever the case, I will be doing them all tomorrow without any of the projections done, so it'll just be a little bit more of a quicker, simplified process on my end, so that way I can then focus on getting all of my projections done, which will then help me to get my finalized rankings, or my more confident rankings up onto the website by Wednesday night, so that those are ready to go, be seen, and help you for those Thursday set of games. I will be going live 1 hour or 45 minutes-ish prior to kickoff on Thanksgiving, just in case anybody wants to stop by and ask any start-sit questions. And then I will also have a probably stripped version of my start-sit column, my Steel Stock Scraps, on, I think I will be releasing that like Friday, so that way I have a longer period of time to not worry about doing anything for YouTube, except for answering any questions in the comments, so I can get everything else done, maybe get some Christmas decorations up as well. Now let's start with the Week 12 waiver wire video, once again starting off with some of the news items, some of the stuff coming through. A lot of stuff is coming through as I'm recording, it seems like. Just like 10 updates came out right as I was getting set up for recording, so if you hear my phone going off, it's probably that. Let's start off with some of the injury updates here. CEH has a high ankle sprain. Typically, that's going to be a 6-week recovery time, so that would be like week 17 that we would be back. So just keep that in mind if you plan on holding on to him. Of course, just like Chase Edmonds here, who also has a high ankle sprain, I'm just going to recommend that you wait for further information. There are 3 different grades of high ankle sprains. All of them have different estimated recovery times. It could be much quicker than 6 weeks, but that is what I saw was the average per an article that was written for NFL.com. So that's what I'm going with right now as an expectation, but once again, if you can, prior to the waiver wires, wait for further news on these injuries just to get a better idea of what the expectations are going forward, in case you might want these guys, if they aren't going to be out for that long. Then Wan'Dale Robinson tore his ACL, so he's obviously done for the year. Kyle Pitts has a torn MCL that will require surgery. I would assume that he'll probably be done for the year, at least for the fantasy season. Kyler Murray may not return until after the bye, so that would be not tonight, not next week, because that's the bye following week. The Lions have started Jameson Williams' practice window. I believe that's a 21-day window. Actually, the alert that I got didn't say, but as far as my memory recalls, that'd be correct. So that has begun for Jameson Williams. The Giants defense should wanted to bring this up, I guess. Had several injuries yesterday. Just in general, that team's had a rough day for injuries. So just keep that in mind going forward for fantasy. They're probably not going to be as tough of a defense as they've been, as limiting of a defense as they've been so far this season. A little bit of a better matchup. Then the Broncos just waived Melvin Gordon not too long ago, and that's going to leave these 3 running backs. So Marlon Mack is currently on the roster. He's the running RB3. I don't have a whole lot of faith in that. Mike Boone was put on IR about a month ago, so I would assume he might be able to be coming back. Maybe that's part of the reason for this move this week. There's obviously more reasons to it than that, but maybe that's where they felt comfortable releasing a guy. And then Devine Ozigbo is on their practice squad. I'm not too super excited about any of these guys, but I forgot to move Latavius Murray. I might move him up a little bit further in my waiver wire rankings here. Then Ravens, Ronnie Staley and Kyle Hamilton both got injured in this last game, and both of their injuries are trending well. Maybe Kyle Hamilton was 2 weeks ago, but I think he seems to have gotten banged up to some extent a few times this season. Whatever the case, that's good. Good for the defense, good for the rushing attack, the whole offense as far as Ronnie Stanley being healthy. Then the Ravens are also optimistic on Rashad Bateman after his surgery that was done this past weekend. Or week, and so they're optimistic for next year because apparently his Liz Frank wasn't as bad as others are. They're thinking that for next season this should not really be an issue, so that would be great. As with any surgery, complications can arise from the recovery process, so we'll just keep our eyes on that all off season. And then the Panthers are unsure of who is going to be starting at quarterback, didn't write that down, this coming Sunday. So that does have some impact on some of the value of the players there for the Panthers, and not knowing that obviously it might shift some of the rankings that I do tomorrow for especially the wide receiver for the Panthers. Then Mike Williams aggravated his high ankle sprain last night. These are injuries from the Sunday night game, and so that's no bueno. We'll see how bad that was or was not, and obviously that makes anybody who held on to Josh Palmer happy in a sense as far as Josh Palmer's value goes currently, going forward probably for at least a week. Then Kadarius Toney had a hamstring injury, so another soft tissue issue for him. Would expect him to be out for a little while, at least in the short term. I do have him on my drop list. You don't feel you need to hold on to him for his upside. If there's somebody else out there that can help you for now to get into the playoffs, that's what matters at this point in the season for a lot of teams, not every situation. As far as bye weeks go this week, there are none. Next week, Arizona and Carolina are on bye, and then week 14, the last bye week, we have Atlanta, Chicago, Green Bay, Indianapolis, New Orleans, Washington. So luckily, that shouldn't be the worst for fantasy football, but depending on your team, it's a lot of players, so it could be a not great situation. So plan ahead. Now is the time where you can, especially if you're in a fab league or something, get yourself some value by planning ahead instead of waiting to make some replacements at the last second when everybody's out there on the waiver wires scrambling to get some guys. Let's move on to the waiver wires. For the quarterback, I just have Russell Wilson on my drop list. Last week, I think I said, hey, let's just see how he does in this game. It's a really, really good matchup, and we saw, and it was not good. So can't trust him in any matchup going forward. I'm sure these won't all be terrible, but it's been a rough year, and he did not pass the test. Now let's move on to my waiver wire quarterbacks. I've just thrown them all out here now. So Jimmy G is, I think, the clear number one waiver wire quarterback that's available right now. We'll see how he does tonight, but I don't think that will have a huge bearing on how I feel about him. And so I put the rest of the season schedules up here. All of their playoff schedules are in bold there. So I assume for most people, you're either doing like a week-to-week streaming thing, in which case, just worry about the next week, really. But I for the most part, in a lot of my waiver wire rankings, I'm not focusing on just next week. I always am planning forward. I want the best players for the season-long schedule, except for in certain cases, especially like the running back tends to buck that the most. But I assume a lot of people have a wide receiver on their team that they play, and they either keep a second wide receiver or a quarterback on their squad, whatever the case. If you are going to be using two quarterbacks, especially this time of the year for the playoffs, it's not a bad thing to do. Here, you can see who lines up the best with whoever you already have, or choose two of these that have some good schedules that go back and forth to go forward with, however you want to do it. But I'm not going to sit here and go through every single freaking combination. That would just be a waste of time. So Deshaun Watson is second on my waiver wire list. Once again, I really like him for this reason. I don't care so much about him for this reason, which may make him untrustworthy for this game. And then I think that this is a pretty tough defense going forward. So my confidence level, once again, if he hasn't done great here, isn't going to be very great going into a tougher matchup. But I believe at least one of these he should give me some faith to start to think, oh, I like him. So I actually picked him up for my team this week with being able to put Gus Edwards into an IR spot, planning ahead, hoping to be able to hold on to him. May not be able to. Then Andy Dalton, I have in my third waiver wire spot going forward. This is really a hodgepodge at this point. There are arguments you can make for a lot of them. There isn't some clear best schedule, but I did try to take the scheduling a little bit into account here as far as the order that I put him in. Kenny Pickett is a bit of an upside pick here. He's got some decent matchups along the way, and once again, we don't know for sure if Baltimore's a stout defense going forward or not, and the one area that they could be the weakest in would be the passing attack. So I would think at least one of two games could end up being good for him. Then Jacoby Brissett, you know what I did not think about? Oh my. Yeah, so he's obviously a very short-term option. I'm like, oh, it looks so much like Deshaun Watson's schedule. How could that be? Then Jared Goff, for the rest of the season, has some games like this where there's some high output and has Carolina, Chicago to finish it off. So it definitely raised his value for me there, but the New York Jets lowered the value right there in the first week of the playoffs. Then Matt Ryan has this schedule, which isn't too shabby. Don't know that I want to trust him any given week ever. Then Ryan Tannehill, similar. So also wanted to point out, next week, Taylor Heineke goes up against Atlanta. So that's a really nice matchup if you need a guy for just 1 week here. Now let's move on to the running back waiver wire options. And this is my you could drop them list. You don't have to, but goes Darrell Henderson, A.J. Dillon, Kareem Hunt. Of course, there's a chance you could regret any of these drops, but Darrell Henderson, I highly doubt you'll regret. A.J. Dillon, I doubt you'll regret. And Kareem Hunt, I don't think that you'll regret. Kind of goes like that. Here are the waiver wire options. So I still have Gus Edwards as the number one option. I think he has the highest potential upside there. Could help to steer that offense back into the right direction. Looks like Ronnie Stanley will be coming back, so that helps a lot too. But if you need somebody this coming week, week 12, Samaje Perine is the best waiver wire option. Going up against Tennessee, there is a chance that Joe Mixon could come back this week, but if you're fighting for a playoff spot, he's probably the guy you want. It just sucks that he's going up against Tennessee. It's a really, really good rushing defense. But he did pretty good through the air this last weekend, so that's helpful. Then Rachaad White, I have third on my waiver wire list. I don't know that I should have him above Isaiah Pacheco, and we'll just do it because of that injury to CEH. So Latavius Murray, and as my third waiver wire option, Isaiah Pacheco, fourth, and Rachaad White sitting down there at the fifth. Then Keontae Ingram plays tonight, so he's a total wild card. He could go anywhere from probably similar value to Rachaad White to being down in this range of running backs. So he has a wide range that really we'll find out tonight what kind of usage he has. It could be great. But yeah, he's the new, if you didn't know, Benjamin out, so he'll be the new RB2 there in Arizona. Then Kyron Williams, I have at the top of this little group of guys, Kyron Williams, Jerick McKinnon, Cam Akers next up on my waiver wire list. Then we get into a lot of these stash type running backs here with James Cook going up the top of the list, because if he is going to start to get a little bit more work, then he becomes viable as an actual starting option in a pinch. That running back situation for the Broncos, I don't know who the second guy is going to be behind Latavius Murray. So depending on the kind of news that I'm hearing throughout this week, this they might rely on one running back going forward for the most part. I don't have a lot of faith in those other running back options to take more than like 30% of the workload and be good with it at the very least. Then Alexander Mattison I have up here, Dontrell Hilliard, Isaiah Spiller, Chase Edmonds because of that injury, but if news comes out that that's a shorter injury, then I like what kind of role he might have with Denver, but it's a very risky thing. he's droppable, as I set up at the top in the news article. It went through the specifics on that a little bit more. Then Tristan Ebner, Kenneth Gainwell, Chuba Hubbard, and Zamir White are all still guys that you could be stashing. Now let's move on to the wide receiver waiver wire options, and you can drop in this order. You don't have to drop these guys once again, but Chase Claypool, Adam Thielen, Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, Drake London, Kadarius Toney, all droppable. I would say especially Chase Claypool and Adam Thielen, I really don't think I'm going to regret dropping. Now let's move on to, I titled these, so my big 4 wide receivers. Starts off with OBJ. Obviously this is a wild card unknown, but he is going to be going to a good team who wants him, and so all the upside in the world with, he did pretty darn good coming in for the Rams late last season. Now let's move on to Treylon Burks, who I have had on this list, and he showed us why last week. It's a little bit of a scary situation, but he has the most upside, I think, and very similar to Darius Slayton type of upside. Darius continues to do it, so we're going to continue to think that might be real. Then DPJ is in a similar situation. I've had him like all season in the middle of my waiver wire list, but now it's happened too consistently at this point to just have him as a weekly fill-in guy. He's moved into he should be on your roster in my big 4 here. And now for the fine 5, similar to these guys, they're fine to have on your roster if that be the situation. So Nico Collins, Michael Gallup, Sky Moore, Terrace Marshall Jr., Justin Watson, all are roster worthy. Then that moves us on to the trembling 2, and they're trembling because they're on unsteady ground. You're not going to feel great if you're putting one of these guys into your lineup, but there is a chance that they could come through like they have, Demarcus Robinson just this last week. Maybe they found something there as far as a connection goes between him and Lamar Jackson, and then Devin Duvernay has this big splash play potential that shouldn't be ignored, but it's been a while since we've seen that. So that's why they're my trembling 2. And let's move on to the forgotten 5, because these guys are fine fill-in options. If you need, they can come through for you all right. And that's Zay Jones, Alec Pierce, Mac Hollins, Julio Jones, Jarvis Landry. Alec Pierce is probably the most trembly out of this group, but he did have the most targets for them last week, so I just moved him up a little bit. He just snuck out of this stinky 6, and then because of potential, moving him up a little bit compared to some guys who I just don't know that there's much of a reliable ceiling as how that goes. That moves us to the stinky 6. I don't know. DeAndre Carter, it's Josh Palmer that going to need another injury for you to be able to trust him, really. But it's possible that he gets some work. He did okay in some situations other weeks besides just recently. Then Corey Davis is injured right now, so we haven't seen that, but there is a connection with him and Zach Wilson from last season that still gives some hope once he returns. Jahan Dotson, maybe he's still healing up. It hasn't been too great since he came back. I don't know, was that just this last week only? But whatever the case, super touchdown reliant on this season. Probably has 1.5 good games. Then Josh Reynolds, DJ Shark is back, so that hurt. He would be higher on this list, but don't really know what to expect going forward once he is healthy, and he is injured anyways. He's missed 3 weeks in a row. Denzel Mims, I said I'd get him on here if I remembered to. I remember to. So there's been some good signs as of late between for the Jets and for Denzel Mims since the injury to Corey Davis. And Van Jefferson makes the list out of opportunity potential, but like I said, they're the stinky 6. And that brings us to the big stash play, or I guess he would be like the number 2 stash option, because OBJ is number 1. That would be Jameson Williams, because that practice window opened. There can be only one. I know that quote line, whatever, only because of not Highlander, but Zach and Miri make a movie. I don't know if I can say that word here on the YouTubes. Now on to the tight ends, and Zach Ertz, obviously you can drop him, but he's still on quite a few rosters. And then Darren Waller is droppable as well. I've got Trey McBride plays tonight, so this is another case of the unknown, and his value could be below Taysom Hill's after tonight, but don't know yet. And these three guys are somewhat similar for different reasons. Logan Thomas, we just saw things go well this week, so let me just say the order here. Trey McBride, Evan Ingram, Juwan Johnson, and Logan Thomas I have in my tier 1 of waiver wire options. Evan Ingram, for the most part this season, has been a pretty reliable, has received a pretty reliable amount of targets. Juwan Johnson, I think that team has found a formula that seems to be working for them pretty good, and that includes Juwan Johnson in it, and he's taken advantage of it and done well for too many weeks to ignore. And then Logan Thomas is someone that we know the potential is there, and we saw that come to fruition to some extent this last weekend for the first time since returning from injury, so high potential guy. That brings me to just a long list of these tier 2 tight ends. Honestly, I could make an argument for Taysom Hill over Greg Dulcich. So here's how that list goes. Greg Dulcich, Hayden Hurst, K. Dotton, Foster Morrow, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry. So Jonnu Smith has been better than Hunter Henry like 3 of the last 4 weeks, something like that. So that's why I have made that move to put him ahead. I've been talking about it for like 2 weeks. Then Tyler Conklin after them, Noah Fant, Robert Tonyan, is it? And then Taysom Hill at the bottom of the waiver wire list. So look forward to the positional videos to at least start coming out tomorrow. I do want to at least get those matchups on there, which will take until into the early afternoon before some of that data is available to me at the very earliest. We'll see if I get all those out tomorrow or not. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good Thanksgiving week. Bye-bye.